What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time? All right, Colin, great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome, man.
Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted you to take us to a moment. You get dropped off in the middle of one of the most desolate places in the world. It's freezing cold. I can't imagine spending 20 minutes there with a group of people, let alone many days. But you're in Antarctica, and it's just you and a 375-pound sled. I'm curious, what are you thinking on those lonely days as you're trudging across the ice and snow and wind and brutal weather up in Antarctica?
Yeah, it was quite a mission. The aim was to become the first person in history to do the entire crossing of Antarctica. So from one coast via the South Pole to the other coast solo. And you mentioned the 375-pound sled, so unsupported, and that means no resupplies of food or fuel. So I had to literally load it up with as much food and fuel as I possibly could. What ended up being 375 pounds, and just pull it, man hauling. No kites, no dogs, nothing. Um, you brought me to the very beginning. What was I thinking right at the beginning of your point? I said the first hour, to be perfectly honest, was maybe the worst hour of my life. I had 1,000 miles to go, and in the first hour, I could barely pull my sled 10 feet.
You're thinking, like, I got to go. This is impossible as it's named appropriately, but I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, literally, talk about, I had just done a bunch of big articles, interviews before I was setting off to this. I'd been interviewed at New York Times, and, Today's Show was following, big press and things like that. I'm like, I'm going to do this thing that no one's ever done, whatever. And hour one, I can't pull my sled. I mean, I can pull it like 10 feet. So it's embarrassing, man. But I started crying, actually, is the first thing that happened. I started crying, and, it's minus 30, minus 40 degrees outside. So it turns out when you start crying, what happens? Well, actually, all the tears, they actually freeze to your face, it's just like the all-time world's most pathetic of all pathetic feelings ever. I had a satellite phone with me, and I called my wife that first day, who's been a huge supporter of mine, built all our businesses together and all of our dreams, really. And I was, kind of explaining the situation. She calms me down. She says, just get in your tent, set your tent up for the first night, see if you can reset yourself. And I get into my tent that night, try to go to sleep, just like, okay, tomorrow morning's going to be better. And I have 1,000 miles to go. You only made it 1 mile, I think less than a mile the first day. And I wake up in my tent, and I will never forget, I always say, I was surrounded by all these people, and people are like, what do you mean you're alone out there? And I'm like, I was surrounded by every worst version of myself. I felt like I was sitting in my tent, and there was like 5 different versions of me, just like saying the worst thing. Colin, you're such an idiot. You're such a failure. One day, I mean, maybe you feel on the 30th day, but the first day, like, you told everyone, you told the New York Times, like, how embarrassing. And I think we can all relate to this moment. Maybe not the moment of being alone in Antarctica, but that moment when you have a big goal, you have a big idea, you have an aspiration, something, or just, any part of your life. And then you're just your worst critic, right? You're just so hard on yourself. Those limiting beliefs of all the reasons why you can't or shouldn't do what you're doing, why you can't achieve your dreams, why you can't unlock your best life. That's what I was doing in that moment. And I am a big believer of this phrase. You probably heard it before, that we are the stories that we tell ourselves. We are the stories that we tell ourselves. And in this moment, day one in Antarctica, trying to do the most, the biggest thing that I've ever done in my entire life, that's where I was. And so I said, I got to cut through this noise. And so I love mantras. I've never done this before. I was desperate, man. I stood up outside of my tent, and I started yelling at the top of my lungs, Colin, you are strong. You are capable. You are strong. You are capable. Trying to rewrite this narrative. Now, I wish I could say that, in an instant, all the fears went away. the next 54 days were brutal pulling my sled, but I made it a little bit further every day. I woke up every single morning with that mantra. And look, there were a lot of low moments in that challenge of getting across Antarctica, but ultimately I made it. Ultimately, I got to the other side. Ultimately, I became the first person in history. And we could talk all sorts, there's a million stories in that journey, let alone some of the others throughout my life. But the essence of that for me, people say, how'd you do it? How did you do it? 375-pound sled, Antarctica, minus 40 degrees, minus 70 wind chill, alone, solitude. And I love to say the most important muscle that any of us has is the 6 inches between our ears. Like, it was, in the end, yes, I need to be physically prepared 100%. Yes, I know I need to know how to survive in Antarctica. Yes. But it was the mindset. It was the strength of the mind. And why I love sharing that with people is that's not a me thing. That's a everybody thing. That's all 7 billion people on the planet. That's every single person listening to the podcast. Our minds are so strong. We can strengthen them. We can sharpen them. And my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, is literally, that is what it's about at its core. It says, invest one day, conquer your mind, and unlock your best life. And that's what I love sharing the stories of adventure, but I love doing that in a way that people are like, oh, what can I take from this? And we all have these minds that can either be our worst enemy, as they were in the tent that morning for me, or our strongest advocate of best strength and the thing that allows us to achieve our dreams.
Makes me think a little bit of the obstacle is the way. I've had Ryan Holiday on a number of times, and that aligns with that. But in most courageous endeavors, I find that the very beginning is usually the toughest part. I mean, even whether it's launching a podcast, writing a book, because I've been in that position where I started, maybe even after getting the book deal, and then thinking, oh, this is terrible. Like, this is the worst. And then but you have to get through that point. This is both physical and mental, and you're alone and you're cold. And so you have your mantras. I don't know if those are enough for the average person. What is it other than the mantras? And is it that there has to be something inside of you, I would imagine, that just says, I'm just not going to stop. I'm curious, how have you developed that mindset of I'm just going to keep going. I'm not stopping, even though it seems literally impossible to move this thing and to keep going, but I'm going to do it anyway. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I've sort of kind of calcified a term, so to speak. I front load my book with it. It's a term that's important. You can call it whatever you want, but I call it the possible mindset, an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. It's really seeing the optimism, the glass is half full, the limitless possibilities that exist. But where that comes from, I mean, what's coming to my mind right now when you ask that question, I'll bring you back to a story earlier in my life. Really, my mother instilled this in me. I think it's something people ask my mom all the time, Colin summited Everest twice, you walk across Antarctica alone, you must be afraid as a mother. And she's like, I am afraid, of course. But she goes, careful what you wish for, when every single day since your kid was born, you tell them they can achieve anything they set their mind to. And we didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, not a lot of resources, but just that belief. But there's a really specific moment where this was a huge turning point in my life. Just after college, I decided to take a backpack and a surfboard and travel around the world. I have a lot of money when I was a kid. I painted houses all through college, and every summer I socked away a couple $1,000, be like, I want to take an adventure before I get, my real job. I have an economics degree from Yale, so I thought I would work in a finance job. Most of my friends thought, you're an idiot for not taking a real job right now. You got these job opportunities. I'm like, no, I'm going to go bum around, live off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and hitchhike around the world a little bit, which was a great experience. And the first part of that trip, I actually met my now wife. So 15 years ago, we've been together for 15 years. So that was a win out of the gate. Hitchhiked around New Zealand, surfed through Australia, like I said, on the cheap as cheap can be, sleeping on floors and whatnot. But it was a great experience until I found myself in a small beach in rural Thailand. And maybe because I was 22 years old without a fully formed prefrontal cortex, I'm not sure, but I saw some guys jumping a flaming jump rope, and I thought, gee, that looks like fun. And I jumped this flaming jump rope, and in an instant, my life changed. The rope lit me on fire to my neck. There was like sprayed excess kerosene throughout my whole body, lit me fully on fire. I was like a fireball running to the ocean to extinguish the flames. Not before about 25%, it saved my life to get in the ocean, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, predominantly my legs and my feet. So it was really bad situation. And I was in rural Thailand. So there's no like proper hospital. I had a moped ride on a dirt path to like a 1-room nursing station. I underwent 8 surgeries in a series of small rural hospitals. And there was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in this sort of makeshift ICU. I mean, it was a bad set of circumstances. And although the physical pain was immense, I mean, we're talking a lot about mindset, the mental side of it was even worse. I'll never forget this moment when the doctor walks in and he looks me in the eyes. I've been a swimmer in college, really thought of myself as an athlete, kind of very in my body. And the doctor looks me in the eyes. He said, "Hate to tell you this, Colin, but you will probably never walk again normally." The way that my legs had been burned, particularly the ligaments in my ankles, my knees, both legs, they were like, "You're just not going to likely regain full mobility. Life's going to be different for you now." And I'll never forget just the emotional, just downward spiral of that moment, just deep depression, deep fear, deep sadness. But there's a heroine of this story, which gets back to where I started with this question, which is my mother comes in, she finds me, she flies to Thailand, she finds me in this small little remote village. And I know now as a mother what that must have been like. And she told me, she's told me later that she was crying with the doctors, pleading with her, doing so afraid, so scared for me. But she never showed me that fear. Instead, she came into my hospital room every single day with this huge smile on her face and this air of positivity, daring me to dream about the future. And I'm like, "I don't want to play this game with you, Mom." She's like, no. Life is not over. This is this moment of this possible mindset. Again, I didn't call it that in this moment, but she's like, "Your life is not over. There are limitless possibilities on the other side of this moment. What do you want to do?" So she had me close my eyes and do this visualization. And she said, "What do you see?" And I said, "This is going to sound ridiculous." I was like, I just saw myself cross the finish line of a triathlon. And my mom could have very easily been like, "Yeah, I set a goal, maybe visualize something different. I mean, the legs, you're not going to walk again normally." She was like, "Great." Instead, she goes, "No, great. That's your goal." She goes, "In fact, you should start training right now." And she yells over to the doctor. She goes, "Hey, doc," it's Thai doctor. She goes, "My son's training for a triathlon right now. I'm lying in a hospital bed. I haven't walked in months. I'm bandaged from the waist down." And she goes, "Doc, bring my son in some weights." So I got these pictures of me. I'm lifting 10-pound dumbbells in a Thai hospital with my waist bandaged from the waist down, legs bandaged from the waist down. And she's going, "My son's training for a triathlon."
Wow.
And again, just like the mantra in Antarctica, it's not like it immediately switched, but there was it's not like I could just walk again and everything worked out, right? But it was the beginning. It was the beginning of that mindset shift. And so fast forward a couple months, I'm in the Thai hospital. I finally fly back to Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, my parents' house. I'm carried on and off the plane. I'm in a wheelchair when I get home. I still haven't taken a single step. And my mom, begins this process of saying, "Today you got to take 1 step. That's your whole goal. Tomorrow you got to take 5 steps. That's your whole goal." My legs are atrophied. They're like this. They're like the size of my wrists. But there's 18 months it goes on like that. And I eventually moved to Chicago, take a job in finance and commodities trading, and sign up for the Chicago Triathlon. And I signed up for Chicago Triathlon, honor that goal, train. I can jog a little bit, I can run a little bit, train at this local gym between, after work and whatnot. And I do the Chicago Triathlon 18 months after being told I would never walk again normally. I finished the race. And to my complete and utter surprise, I actually win the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of about 5,000 other participants on the day. My first triathlon after all this, which, it's easy to get caught up, like, I guess, in the win. Oh, holy shit, you won this race. You totally never walk in normally. You must be a superhuman athlete. But that's not the lesson in that for me. And that's not the answer to the question that you asked about how or why. My mother in this moment, in my darkest moment, instilled this in me of saying, like, "Hey, like, life is hard. We are going to go through hardships. We are going to go through setbacks." Hopefully for you listening, it's not, being burned in a fire and being told you never walk again. But I don't care who you are. the richest, the poorest, the youngest, the oldest. Like life throws curveballs at you. It's tough for you. It's like, man, I've written 2 books. Like, it's hard, man. You sit down and write that first paragraph, that first page, you're like, oh, this is a long journey, man. What I get myself into, right? And you have that ability to just give up in a lot of ways. Or I think about if my mom hadn't come there and instilled this possible mindset in me in this moment, I go, look, I sit here humbly with 10 world records. I set all those world records after being burned in the fire, after being told I would never walk again normally, right? Meaning that, like, even from our lowest moments, we can actually, in this case, learn our life's greatest lesson. So if we can keep persevering, if we can keep pushing through the tough moments, more often than not, we can actually reach some extremely high highs. But it's all about that, because I look at the other alternative. Had I been left up to my own devices in Thailand, I think I would have just downward spiraled in that hospital. I have no idea where my life would be today, but I'm pretty certain I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about this. And so there's a lot, you mentioned Ryan Holiday, the obstacle is the way, or there's a lot to be said that, adversity, challenges certainly can teach us a lot, particularly when we're open to that, to go, okay, this is terrible, but what can I learn here? How can I keep moving forward? How can I keep progressing? And I know for you, your book's amazing, man. Like, having that on your shelf, you're like, man, I struggled through this, but like now it's here. Like, this is epic. And I'll close this thought by saying, I like to think, and I write about this in the 12-hour walk as the core principle for me. It's something I really love sharing, which is, I think of life on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being our lowest moments, that burn accident in Thailand, right? Just, we all know these ones, and 10 being our highest highs. Maybe for you, it's the day you're book pubbed, for me, it's, after all that hardship in Antarctica, actually completing it, like, holy shit, I did it, man. Like, no one in history did it. I did it. 54 days. I've been starving. It's been so hard, whatever, but I crossed. Those are 10s. Or, 10s can be more simple, right? Skiing powder on a fresh pow day, dancing the day your first child is born. Like, we know the 10s. We love that. Everyone loves the 10s, right? These epic peak moments of life. But when I think back on all my 10s, I realized I didn't get there in spite of the ones. I got there because of the ones, meaning I had that 10 on the other side of Antarctica because I had that 1 on the first day and couldn't pull my sled. And I had that moment, day 20, when I got caught in a whiteout and I was so afraid. The 10 was there because I pushed through the challenges. And too often in our modern society, I think people get stuck in what I call the zone of comfortable complacency, this zone between 4 and 6. It's like, you got a job, it's fine, it pays the bills, you don't love it, you don't hate it. It's like a 5 every single day, driving to the office, 5, 5, 5, 5. Or like, you've been in a relationship for a few years or whatnot, and it's not toxic, it's not bad, you're not like abusive to one another or anything like that, you cohabitate, it's fine, but it's like 5, 5, 5. Like, so often we get stuck fully. It's not to say you should never be at a 5, but just like hundreds of days in a row of 5, zone of comfortable complacency. And I wonder why. I ask myself why. I realize it's because so many people are so afraid of experiencing the 1s or the 2s that they're hedging so far against the downside of that. But in doing so, you actually take the 10s off the table. You take the 8s, you take the 9s, you take the 10s off the table because you're so afraid of having any little of adversity. It's a silly metaphor, but it's like, you want to remodel your kitchen and you think, oh, I want new appliances, a new floor, a new backsplash, oh, this look great and whatever. Like, the first thing you do isn't snap your fingers and get to the 10, the finished product. The first thing you do is you rip out the plumbing, your sink doesn't work, you don't have a dishwasher in your house for a month. Like, it sucks for a little while. You feel that, you the 2, the 3, but then you have that, the final end product. I guess that's a silly metaphor, but it's easy to wrap your mind around. But that's how life is. That's how life is. You have to be willing to experience some of those downsides, because that is what brings the fulfillment and the joy. And at the call to action in this book, the 12-hour walk, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is this. It's a one-day exercise that in the end brings fulfillment, in the end drives purpose, in the end allows you to cultivate this possible mindset. But it also encourages you to step outside that comfort zone, to not have another 5 day. And you might feel a couple 2s and 3s, but that is the path. That is the path to those 10s.
the biggest moments, the greatest accomplishments are always preceded by really hard stuff. Whether you're a part of a winning football team, I bet the June and July and August workouts to condition yourselves and to bond as a team were really hard. I know that from firsthand experience. Or publishing a book. The years leading up to that moment is brutal. And I think I love that way of looking at life of so many live between 4 and 6 every single day, and then live maybe for the weekend to get to, like, I guess a 7 if they go out with their friends, as opposed to being willing to risk it and have a 1. But without that, you never get the 10. And almost just viewing life as that's the way it goes, or that's the way I think it should go. So for the person who is living in the 5s and 6s, what are some actionable things they can do right now that where they are going to put some 1s on the scoreboard? It's going to happen, but they also then open themselves up for the chance to get to the 10s. What are some actionable steps someone could take right now to live in that manner?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna take the opportunity to share with you what the 12-hour walk is, because
Absolutely.
not just to plug this idea in my book. I'm so passionate about it, but it is literally designed for this question, which is how to live a more fulfilling life, how to find that depth, how to find that purpose. And I think, sometimes I can be a long and meandering, try a little bit of this, do a little bit of this. Like, this is one specific call to action that I know and I've seen firsthand can fundamentally change your life in a single day. So when I was walking across Antarctica, I pulled my sled every day for 12 hours. That was my normal day. And I got to the other end on my literal last bite of food. So if I had gone 1 hour less every single day, I actually wouldn't have made it. And I was already burning like a 3,000 calorie deficit every day. At the end, I was burning 10,000 calories and only eating 5,000. So, I mean, I was a bag of bones, ribs sticking out, hips sticking out. I was on my last limit. But as my body got weaker, inevitably over time, over those 54 days, I found this shift in my mind. My mind actually started to get stronger. I started to have more confidence. I started to be less afraid of Antarctica. I started to be less afraid of the wind and the cold. And I found myself in these places in my mind of deep flow state, like just locked in for hours, sometimes days at a time, when, like, although the external things that were happening were so difficult and so hard, I had this peace and calm in my body. And when I got to the other side, in my first book I wrote a couple years ago called The Impossible First, the last chapter, when I get to the end of Antarctica, spoiler alert, I call it infinite love. Not, I did this amazing thing, I'm so cool. Because what I found in the end of this flow state was this, like I said, fulfillment, connection to my family, connection to my wife, connection to, I have a nonprofit, so I'm inspiring kids, like connection to that purpose, connection to my why. And that was a beautiful thing to experience. And then when I had that experience, I thought, wow, I can take this with me. I can just take this with me through the rest of my life. And for a while, that was true. I did find this deep fulfillment, purpose, and drive in my life that was really profound. And then COVID hit. And I think we all remember what March of 2020 felt like. We're all in different places, but I think there's a common lived experience of some regard, right? Like, I was trapped in my house, locked in my house in the Oregon coast with my wife and my dog. I don't pretend like we had it as worse as some other people, but I mean, when it's doom scroll in the news, people are dying. There's so much fear. What's happening? This country's locked. You can't walk outside. What's going on, right? And I found myself sitting there in a pretty deep, dark place in the midst of, some serious depression, anxiety, pretty far away from that peace and fulfillment and depth that I had found, a couple years earlier. And everything I had planned was canceled. I had a book tour going on, it was canceled. I had another expedition going, it was canceled. Everything, just like we all did, right? Like, life, just like, whoa, what's happening? And I remember at one point, my wife looks over, she's like, you haven't gotten out of your pajamas in 3 days. You've just been sitting there on the couch, like scrolling your phone, social media, whatever, Zoom calling family, just like not knowing what to do with myself. And I was like, I have not felt this bad in a long time. So I got to shake out of this funk. And I thought back to this time in Antarctica, and I go, it's so weird, but even though it was so hard and so brutal and so rough out there, I actually found a lot of peace in the stillness of being outside, moving my body. So I said to my wife, this might sound ridiculous, but I'm grasping at straws here. Tomorrow I'm going to go outside and go for a walk, long walk. But I'm thinking I might stay out for 12 hours, use like I did in Antarctica. So don't worry about me. I'll be back by dinner time or whatever. She's like, all right, whatever. She's seen me do a bunch of crazy random stuff over time. She's like, okay, have fun. So I walk out the door the following morning on the Oregon coast and I start walking. 20 minutes in, my phone buzzes in my pocket. And instinctively I grab for my phone. I think, okay, who's texting me? I got to text him back or whatever. And I'm like, look at my phone. I'm like, what am I doing, man? Like, I've just been staring at my phone. Like I said, doom scrolling the news. Like, oh, it's like, I don't need my phone right now. So I just like, I put my phone in airplane mode and keep walking. No music, no podcast, nothing. Silence, stillness, alone in my own thoughts. And all sorts of stuff was bubbling up. Thoughts from my life, like, man, why are you feeling so stuck? What are you down? And then also kind of these positive revelations, tapping back into that flow and that connectedness. And when I got back to my front door, my wife, the first thing she says to me, she goes, you're back. And I think, yeah, I'm back. Like I told you, I'd come back in 12 hours. She goes, no, you're back. Meaning she just saw a shift in me without even me really saying anything. She was like, and I was like, honestly, I feel better than I have felt in so long. I needed that, solo walk. And so I thought, whatever, I'm the guy who crossed Antarctica, I'm a guy with 10 world records, whatever. I like to move my body. Like this is a me thing. But during COVID, as we all knew, as I did as well, tons of friends, tons of family members, tons of people in my community that were also going through a tough time, just stuck and just going like, what's I do? And I started just suggesting this to people. I said, man, it sounds ridiculous, but I did this 12-hour walk thing. It really changed everything for me. Why don't you give it a try? And before I knew it, dozens of people in my community, people from different walks of life, young, old, fit, not fit, started taking this walk. And I say this because the 12-hour walk, it's not about how far or fast you go. This is not an endurance feat. I don't care if you go for 1 mile or 50. My 77-year-old mother-in-law literally walked one time around her block, sat on her porch for an hour in silence, walked another time around her block. But she did the 12-hour walk because this is an exercise of the mind. And now that, I started sharing this with people in this COVID moment, and since then, I have seen such a remarkable difference for people. It's a reset. We are so connected, and I'm not vilifying technology in day to day, but I ask most people, what's the longest time you spent in your alone, your thoughts and your silence over the last 10 years? And people go like, I don't know, man, 30 minutes. Like, I always have my phone. I always throw music on when I'm in the car. I've got my kids around me. I got my family around me, and I'm like, look, sleeping doesn't count. Because some people are like, well, I sleep 8 hours a day. I'm like, that does not count. And it's been powerful, man. And so your question was, how can people embrace embrace that full tapestry of life? And the 12-hour walk, it's a book. I'm proud of the book. The book is full of all sorts of stories of adventure, things that will light up your mind, your curiosity. The book is broken down into the 10 most common limiting beliefs we all face, myself included. And I share that very vulnerably in the book. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? What if people criticize me? I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. And each chapter breaks down each one of those limiting beliefs and how we can shift away from them and shift toward a possible mindset. But in the 1 to 10 thought process, yeah, when you walk out there that first hour, man, when you're alone in your thoughts, you're not used to that. You might have a lot of negativity or just like be disoriented because you're not used to hearing that inner dialogue. Hour 5, hour 6, your feet might get tired. I told you, take as many breaks as you want, but your feet might get tired. It's a long day out there. Maybe it's hot. It's middle of summer. It's like, man, it's hot. Bring some water with you. I encourage that. You're going to feel something broken free. You might feel that too. You might feel that 3, but I have never known anybody to get back to their door and not have a deep sense of accomplishment, fulfillment, presence of mind, pushing through that, because implicitly, this is a break in your norm. This is a break in your own psychological norm, in your day-to-day norm. This is not a 5. Think about all those 5s that you've lived this year. You can't even probably remember what you did every day last month, last year. There's some, myself included, there's days that go by in our life you can't even barely remember what you did. You will remember this. And the imprint on this experience is so positive. And like I said, I've seen this at scale. My goal is to inspire 10 million people to take the 12-hour walk. It's free. It costs you nothing. You do this out your front door and it will change your life.
You thinking of 10 moments and the ones that go along with them. You were invited to a dinner. You write about this at the beginning of your book in New York with a bunch of older rich guys, for lack of a better phrase, older rich guys. And I think you can learn a lot from people who have lived life longer than us. I enjoy talking. I have a conversation with one later today, in fact, much older, like twice my age. And I think it's useful to talk to people like that because they have so much more perspective. They just have more repetitions at living life.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to talk to a number of those people. I know initially you felt some imposter syndrome, but then they were kind of, I think, by the end of it, really engaged by you and what you do. And I think you learned a lot. Can you share what you learned that night? And maybe you can take us to the beginning of the story if you want, when you were with what the outside world would say highly successful, and everyone has their own definition of that, but people would say that was a room of highly successful older guys, and you were invited to talk with them.
Yeah.
Can you share more about what you learned that night?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason I opened the book in this scene, because it was such a powerful imprint for me. It was a few years ago, just not long before COVID, actually. I was invited to Manhattan for this speaking engagement. I was going to speak to 500 or so bankers on a Wall Street kind of conference. But the night before, kind of a select group of people invited me to this dinner, just a small, more intimate setting. And it's like the CEOs and the fund managers and whatever, these guys are all, hundreds of millionaires, billionaires, like you said, very, very wealthy guys. And generally speaking, much older. Pegged the average age 65, but up to, 75, 80, older group of gentlemen. And it's funny beginning of, you say the imposter syndrome. Like, I literally almost didn't get let in the room. Like, I'm wearing a black t-shirt and jeans like I always do. And the doorman's like, yo, I'm expected in the penthouse. And they're like, the guy's like, are you with catering? The service elevator's like over there, man. And I'm like, I think I can go in the main elevator. But I walk in there and sure enough, as you might expect, I was definitely underdressed, tailored suits, $100,000 watches, it's that, like you said, that dripping with the external trappings of success, or the way that that's framed a lot in our culture. And I certainly, by no shape or form, I'm vilifying wealth or success. I've been fortunate to have very little in my life, and fortunate to also have a lot of abundance in my life over time. But the external of that was like, oh, these guys have made it. And that was your point. Like, I love talking to people, different generations, and just kind of, riffing and being like, okay, tell me your story. And they're super interested in, Colin, did you see any dead bodies when you were climbing Everest? What was it like in Antarctica? I had just recently done this rowboat expedition where I rowed a boat across the most dangerous ocean crossing in the world, the Drake Passage. So I was in this tiny rowboat, 750 miles, 40-foot swells. They're just like, they're so curious about these stories. And I love sharing these stories if people are curious and interested, much as I do in the book. And they say to me, I have this question I love asking people, and I ask it to young students in, these schools that I speak to for my nonprofit. I talk to the adults about it. And the question's simple. It's, what's your Everest? My childhood dream was to climb Everest, and I had never knew how I was going to get there. Like I said, I didn't have the money or the means or even the mountaineering background when I was a kid, but I was just like, it was, I want to reach that goal one day. So I love asking people like, well, what's your Everest? Like, it doesn't have to be mountaintop. It doesn't have to be this. And I thought these guys who clearly have summited some big mountains, quite literally and figuratively, we're going to have oh yeah, I dreamed of this and that's how I created this, or I am who I am because of this. And I just get crickets. Like, for the first time in the whole dinner, there's just this kind of awkward pause. Everyone's sort of looking at each other. No one wants to speak up. And we've all been in that moment in a dinner or in social setting where just there's sort of this awkward moment. And then it just passes, right? Like, someone just says another joke and you move on. And so it was just I was like, oh, okay, I guess they didn't want to answer that. Whatever. Okay. whatever. And we start, talking about other stuff. So the night winds down, and I'm walking to the elevator to go down to leave and saying goodbye to everyone. And a guy probably the oldest gentleman in the evening, if I had to guess, 75, 80 years old, kind of taps me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, Colin," really kind guy. He's like, "Hey, you have a minute of your time before you leave?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" And he goes, "I want to apologize for myself and my friends here. You asked a very insightful question to us and none of us answered." And he goes, "I've been thinking about that ever since you asked it." And and he's just he's kind of stumbling over his words, which I can tell is not normal for him. This guy's obviously a very confident person. And he's like, "Man, I've made more money than you can possibly ever imagine. But there's not a day that I don't go back to this moment in summer camp in the Catskills when I was 12 years old. And I was on this boat, coincidentally a rowboat. And I just never felt more free than in that moment." And he goes, "I've always wondered what would happen." He goes, "I think the time has run out for me, but I've often wondered what would have happened had I had the gumption to ask myself that question. What's my Mount Everest?" Because he goes, "I've reached a lot of actual mountaintops in my life, and everyone's told me you're successful, you've done it all." But he goes, "I'm not sure that I reached my Mount Everest, what actually it is." And then he kind of left it there. And I wish I had talked to him for another 30 minutes and kind of dove deeper, but he was expressing a level of regret. And it was a shocking circumstance to experience that in, right? Because as you said, when you asked the question, like, the expectation or the thought or the easiest thing to say is, "Oh, this person has it all. They must be happy. They must be fulfilled. They must, they've got it all. Look at them. They won life. They did it." And so it's important, and it frames the sort of kind of entire book. And in a lot of ways, it frames a lot of my thoughts on that question, right? What is a life well lived? What does fulfillment look like? It's really as simple as answering that question for yourself, not for other people, not other people's expectation of that answer for you, living other people's lives. But what is your Everest? What is that? And it can be anything, right? It could be making a ton of money. It could be making $1 million. It could be saving 1 million lives. It could be, having deep impact in your community. It could be loving on your family. It could be starting that business. It could be winning the sports championship. And there's no right answer to this question, but you got to ask yourself that question. And a 12-hour walk, again, is a way, a lot of people have a clear answer to that question, say, "My Mount Everest is this," but they answer it and they go, but I can't do it because, again, enter all these limiting beliefs. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? And there's another subset of people that go, "Man, I haven't even bothered to ask myself that question because I've just been on the conveyor belt of life that I didn't really think I had the autonomy to ask myself this question." And so the silence and the stillness of the 12-hour walk, the exercise itself, can be for both groups. If you know what that Everest is, it allows you to push aside limiting beliefs. It allows you to get inside your mind and be stronger and more confident on the other side to actually take those steps, those incremental steps to reaching the summit of your dreams. And if you're in the camp of going, "Man, I don't even know what that is because I haven't even bothered to ask myself that question," let those 12 hours be an exploration. Let the curiosity of that moment be, my Mount Everest on this walk is to figure out what my Mount Everest is, what my purpose is. Because on the other side of that, I can drive towards that. And just even if you're an 80-year-old man in the fanciest apartment you've ever seen with your Patek Philippe watch and your Armani suit or whatever it is, with all the money in the world, that person's having a human experience too. And if you get to the end of your life full of regret, full of wishing you could go back, full of wishing you could make a change, unfortunately, you can't turn back the clock on that. And so the moment is right now. If you haven't already, right now, don't hesitate a second longer. Life is precious. This time is precious that we have. Fill it with the things that you want that to be. Surround yourself with the people you want to surround yourself with and find that fulfillment, because nothing is more important than that.
Man, this is so good. How about I'll raise one more objection for you, just for sake, because this is one that I hear, and that is, and it goes along with probably the I don't have enough time limiting belief, but it's Colin, I have kids, 2 mortgages, 3 cars, college to pay for. I got to work, man. Like I got to pay the bills. That's my responsibility, is to provide economic security for my family. Must be nice that you can say this. And now you're actually doing both. So good on you. But I've been at this for 20 years or whatever. That may be for others. I don't think that can be for me, based on all of the responsibilities that in my life that I want to take care of. What do you say to that person?
Yeah, 100%. The 12-hour walk as an exercise is not an exercise to stay on the other side of it and not blow up your whole life. There's likely a bunch of things you're in this hypothetical scenario. And I've had that same conversation numerous times. That's probably the most common sort of archetype. And I respect the hell out of that. Like, that person is showing up for their family, for themselves, trying to be their best self, trying to support, again, kids, family, the kids' future, etc. Like that is that in a lot of ways a life well lived. There's a lot of components of that are important. So it's not like, oh, take the 12-hour walk, divorce your wife, throw the kids out of the house and go on a trip, gallivanting around the world, and you're as a middle-aged, that's not the prescription here. But what I will say, I'll answer the 2 pieces. One, there's a time quotient to that, right? I don't have enough time because I have these responsibilities. And what I say to that is, your emotions in that are coming from the right direction. Because what you're saying is, I need to be there for my family. I need to be there for my job. Like that is noble. But what you realize in that is, you actually being there, what I think means being there as your best self. And there's this weird myth in our culture that self-care or taking care of yourself is somehow selfish, like you shouldn't do it. Like, what I'm saying is, hell yeah, if you're a male, or if you're a parent, if you're a dad, if you're a mom, you want to be at all your kids' soccer games. You want to be all those important moments. But I'm saying, take one day. And if you it's a Saturday, you miss one soccer game of your kid, that's a little bit of a bummer. You missed one soccer game. But the 12 hours, that will give you the presence, the strength to show up even more over the next five years. Let's say you become a better version of yourself. Then the one little moment, that one day that you took to yourself, it's not selfish, it's actually selfless. Because what you're actually saying in that is, I have these responsibilities. Say, I want to be the best husband. I want to be the best father. I want to be the best, colleague at work. I want to be the most, lit up and successful in my life. The people around you and the impact you're trying to have in the world are actually going to be better because you took a moment to yourself to not be burnt out in that grind, to be lit up creatively. And so I think that's a big piece of it. And that's why I love this prescription, because it's not, oh, hey, go away for 3 months and become a monk in the mountains and throw away everything. It's like, hey, man, we all have a day. How many hours do you watch? Have you seen every episode of Game of Thrones? How much you've been on your social media? People are like, well, yeah, I've seen that. I'm like, so you don't have enough time? Like, you've watched 75 hours of Game of Thrones. Me too, man. I love that show. But like, come on. Like, you have the time. It's about prioritizing the time, right?
From a leadership perspective, the most impactful leaders I've ever been around, whether they're coaches, bosses, teachers, whatever it may be, they were really good at leading themselves first. And that, whether it's development and learning and growing and getting better, or literally taking time for themselves. And if they have a partner, like, them and their partner were very clear from a communication perspective that both of them needed their own thing, their own time, to work and better themselves. It's not always we have to be together. I think that's critical. Like, one goal I set for myself is weird, Colin, but it's not, I don't know if I'd call it an Everest, but it was really important to me. At the beginning of the year, I remember last summer, one of my favorite things in the world to do was throw my 6-year-old daughter, Charlie, just throw her in the pool. She loves it. The biggest smile, like, literally brings me to tears thinking about these moments. Well, this summer she's 7, and I thought, is there a way for me to stack more work when it's cold? I live in Ohio, than when it's hot in the summer, so that I could leave and get out of here most days when I'm in town, not on the road working or whatever, at 3-ish, 3:30, 4 o'clock, so I could go straight to the pool. We have one that's within walking distance, and I could throw her as many times as she wants, because that is like an Everest moment for me. I also have older children who are they're too big now to do that. I still try a little bit, but they're just too big. So I know there's this finality towards growth of a kid that I'm not going to be able to do that forever. In fact, I may only have a couple summers left, maybe one of that before she's too big. So to me, the Everest is doing whatever work I can so that 3:30-ish, 4 o'clock, when it's hot outside, when the pool is open, that's where we're going to be. And I'm very happy with accomplishing that goal almost every day. So I think, like, whatever the little thing is, yes, there's a lot of work that went into preparing, and there still is. There's weekend work. There's other things. There's work when others are sleeping. Whatever it may be, it's figuring it out for yourself, right? And even if the goal seems stupid to somebody else, who cares? It's mine. Like, that's what I want, And so that's what I think, like, this is the way to really be thoughtful about these moments. And it may change. It may evolve, but whatever it is for you, it's important to have this mindset.
100%. I mean, I love that. I love so much of what you just said, particularly it's you. It doesn't matter if this matters to anybody else. And you have had the presence of mind to actually make this calculus. So many people often are like, I love it when I throw my daughter in the air, but they don't say, like, so therefore, let me do these other things in my life to maximize this. They're letting life, the moments that it happens, but you're doing it proactively. And that's the difference, right? You're saying, hey, and that gives you purpose. That gives you maybe more focus at the, 2 o'clock on a Thursday in the middle of winter. Like, I'm doing this because this will allow me. And I love also what you said of the clear finality to this phase of your daughter's life. She's not going to be 6 forever. She's not going to be 7 forever. She's not going to be 8 forever. Like, you got to take advantage of these moments, and taking that time to yourself in your own thoughts, in your own mind, in that 12-hour walk allows you to have an honest conversation with yourself. What's important to me? What do I prioritize? How can I quiet the noise on the other stuff? But how can I actually make these shifts in my life? And back to your previous question, not just blow up your whole life to change everything. Like, the archetype that you describe of the 2 mortgages and the college, like, you are showing up because you have a high nobility, you have high integrity, you're working hard. And so this isn't like a hack of like how to not do anything ever so you can like let everyone down in your life. It's the opposite. How can you show up as your best self? How can you be present as a father in that moment with your daughter at the pool, that you're there, you are really there? And cultivating that possible mindset, letting go of those limiting beliefs allows you to have those present moments and really experiencing, again, that full tapestry of the life experience and strength of that.
You've met so many impressive people over the course of your career. You've been highlighted on all of the most famous TV shows. So you've been around people who I would say have sustained excellence over time. You're obviously a person who has sustained excellence. Colin, like, what have you found to be some of the commonalities, the common attributes, the common behaviors of people who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time?
I love that question. Passion is one, but I'll go deeper on that, which is a deep connection to why, deep connection to why. Everyone's why, everyone's purpose can be very different. It's funny. This is not a story I've ever told. I'm not sure, but it comes to my mind. I want to share it in this moment. So there's a guy who's been a huge mentor of mine. His name's Brian Gelber, a very famous commodities trader, actually. He came on as my first sponsor after that Chicago triathlon victory. I wasn't working for him, but I'm really close friends with his daughter and her husband. And I was at a barbecue the day I won that Chicago triathlon. I'm 24 years old. And he's like, you won the Chicago triathlon today? Like, what? Like, he's like, that's crazy. And he ends up, we have this whole conversation. I'm dreaming about going to the Olympics, me one day as a swimmer. That's always what I wanted. And he said, well, probably wouldn't be as lucrative as your financial career, but if you're passionate about triathlon, like, I can maybe help you out if, you'd want to sponsor or something. And I was like, oh my God, incredible. So I actually ended up quitting my job to race triathlon professionally for about 6 or 7 years. And again, it was not like the NBA or MLB. It was like sleeping on buddies' couches, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But I was really got this opportunity in my 20s to push my body in that way. And he stayed beside me. It was a huge support, both emotionally and financially. But I always had this interesting question with him, and this comes back a little bit to money, which is wildly successful guy, clearly has made a ton of money in his life, whatever. And he goes to work every single day, lives in Chicago suburbs, drives to downtown where he has an office, his company has several hundred employees, and he shows up every single day. I remember one time I asked him, I'm like, man, you're like I think he's in his 60s now, or maybe he's in his late 50s when I asked this question. I was like, why are you going to work every day, man? Like, why are you going to work? And he was like, because I love it, man. I love it. And this is a guy who's, he's got 5 kids, married the same woman for 40 years, and can create, someone who I really look up to, a model of family and communities and values in the right place. But even further, we have this idea. And for some people, working is a means to an end. Like, your purpose is different than that. So I'm not saying this is like, you should be Brian Gelber and only want to work. And he doesn't only work. He has a deep relationship with his family, friends, everything. But like, your question was about people that have sustained it, is that they're not doing something like, oh, I'm making this massive sacrifice in this moment. I hate doing this. This is horrible, blah, blah, blah. Because all I want to do is sit on a beach and drink a cocktail and drink whatever, not do this, right? Mm-hmm. The people that have sustained excellence over time are in it for like the love of the game. I mean, in the world of podcasting, since we're on a podcast right now, I've been on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of times. And obviously everyone knows the most successful podcast ever, the hugest audience, whatever. Like, that dude started that podcast when no one knew what podcasting was, because he was curious to talk to people. That's why he was doing it. He wasn't doing it to become the most famous podcaster of all time. And I think people have been drawn to that show over time because there's just like the genuine curiosity of the love of the game, like the love of the game. And so whether it's podcasting, in Brian Gilbert's case, it's, working in the financial industry, and he loves coaching young traders, whether it's, whatever it is you're doing in your life, the people that have sustained excellence. And I have asked myself this question. My wife said to me, she said this to me before every single one of my expeditions. My expeditions clearly have life or death stakes. So you got to ask yourself this question, why, at some point. And she's going, she says to me, this is the question. She goes, we know that if I cross Antarctica solo and do this, there's going to be a bunch of press and probably leads to some financial prosperity for us. We're not blind to that fact. And we love sharing stories at scale versus through media, social media and stuff like that. Cause I love using storytelling to inspire others, because I've been inspired by so many other people's stories. That's why you do a podcast, right? You have these conversations that has this ripple effect of positivity of sharing other people's stories. I mean, as humans, I love that. So I'm not going to share my stories, but there's a question that she asked me that says, Colin, on this expedition, on this next expedition, if no one was watching, there was no social media, no camera crew, no one knew about it, the only person you could tell about it was me when you got back home, would you still do it? And every single time, my answer has been unequivocal, yes. Yes. And that's when I know that I'm doing the right thing. And the first time that my answer is no to that question, oh, I'm climbing this mountain and risking my life because I can make this headline of the da-da-da-da that will open this door to whatever, that is the first sign of like, oh, then I'm not doing the right thing anymore. And the people that have sustained excellence over time have that clear purpose of why. And they're showing up for something more than just the external trappings of what that might look like.
So good, man. Love, as Jerry Seinfeld said, love is infinite. And I agree. I agree. If we're fortunate enough to find that, and you got to do work, maybe go on a 12-hour walk. And that's why I would encourage everyone to read The 12-Hour Walk. Invest one day, conquer your mind, and unlock your best self. That's the title and subtitle. It's really well done. It's highly practical, great storytelling. You weaved them all together, man. It's not surprising. You've done it before. Now you've done it again. And it's amazing for all of us, I think, for you to take these crazy experiences and translate them. They're almost portable so that you can then implement what you've learned in people's lives who don't climb Mount Everest or walk across Antarctica. So I highly recommend people get the book, The 12-Hour Walk. It's great, man. Colin, thanks so much for investing so much of your time today and being truly present for this. I could feel it and see it. It means a lot to me, man.
Well, thanks for having me. And like I said, thanks for picking up the book. And if people want to sign up, 12hourwalk.com. It's free to sign up for the walk. I've got an app that helps support the walk. If people are looking for a day, they're going, I don't know what the day to do is. September 10th, I'm actually organizing a mass participation. It's still from your front door. It's still by yourself, but I'll be walking that day. Other people will be walking. So if you need that accountability to others and community, but the 12-hour walk is evergreen. It's something you can do any single day. And like I said, you invest that day, it will unlock the beginnings of your best life. It will teach you some deep lessons, incredibly valuable. So I'm passionate about spreading this message, 12hourwalk.com. And thanks for spending this time with me, man. It's been great to sit with you.
Awesome, dude. And I don't want this to be the last one, so I'd love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
All right. Thanks, man.